I think once you have functional or working real world verification, you can then tie that data to like a reputation graph, right? You can say like, this node has been performing this well for this long, so we trust them more than someone who just joined the network.
You have to remember these AIs are looking at every event of every peer on the entire network.
All the data, yeah.
Yeah, and it's beyond the capability of a human if the DePIN is any size to be meaningful, right? The scale is just too big.
All right, Dave, thank you for being here. Very excited to do this. Real world verification is the topic I hear being thrown around out there at the summit over the past few weeks. I think it's what DePIN needs to figure out to really scale to serve enterprise customers that have certain SLAs that they need to hit, to prevent gaming in terms of trying to earn a bunch of token incentives for doing something that's not really that valuable to a network. So what would you say Reppo's approach is to the real world verification problem?
So we have two sides of this. We're trying to bring AI specialists, people who know how to take a pile of data, generate models that are highly tuned to detecting gaming or to detect optimization. Like, hey, if we allocate resources here or there, we're getting maximum value out of this DePIN. That's one side. That's the XYZ side. So repo.xyz. And then the repo.ai side is a marketplace and payment rails for monetizing the models that are generated. So not all of these models will be held privately, but maybe DePINs will collectively generate models and stuff, and they'll want to monetize them as well. So our approach is to just basically make it accessible because we really believe in DePINs, and we think that we have the ability to automate basically the self-governance layer in DePINs. Like LLMs are really good at spotting patterns.
Yeah.
And if you train it off of data, like, hey, this is what it looks like when someone's gaming our network. Here's what it looks like when the peer is operating optimally or whatever, then it's able to be sort of an immune system almost, where it can signal, hey, we're seeing signal here that there's probably potential gaming, or these are all looking good. And so our approach is really just trying to scale governance, and then also being able to price risk and to also automate the reputation modeling, right? So we see it as kind of a critical piece for DePINs as they mature and seek to supplant traditional infrastructure.
For sure. I think it's interesting to have the incentive model to get people to contribute kind of models that are useful or interesting. It's also interesting just the approach of, even if we're not verifying things on device and taking like a hardware approach, if we are kind of probabilistically looking at data that's coming in from the real world and then pulling out outliers and saying this seems unusual, at least flag it to the DePIN. I think that's an approach that can definitely work, right? You're basically looking out for things that are odd that are going on.
Yeah, sure. And it can augment also, physical verification. It might even be as simple as, hey, can we hire somebody to drive out and take pictures?
Yeah.
Right? Like it might even be that simple, at least for some DePINs, right? Maybe if it's solar panels that aren't generating, or it's a radio that's not transmitting or whatever, it could be the optimal way to signal that kind of physical verification.
Definitely. And it just brings to mind a funny, like early Helium community story where the incentives almost were in place. So basically like Helium's a wireless project. I'm sure you know that people are setting up, whether they're IoT or Wi-Fi nodes.
I'm from Salt Lake City.
Oh, nice. Okay.
It made the news that there were these weird radios on the mountains all around. Yes. And I'm like, those are Helium nodes. Nobody knew what they were. And I was like, I know what those are.
There's that. And there was also community members in the Discord that would go out themselves and drive to locations and kind of test the connectivity. And the incentive was implicit in the sense that like if someone's gaming and earning an outsized share of the rewards, that person is earning less. And so they were incentivized, I guess, to then go out and check on these deployments and kind of like report them. So that's like a very manual way to do it, I guess, but one that I've seen, in the past so far.
Yeah, and if you deploy AI, you can actually generalize it to any kind of DePIN, right? Because it's almost like a feedback mechanism in the feedback loop itself, right? Like how much of the signal gets fed back into the input, and the AI is really good at observing the giant stream of events and picking out signals. I can attest to this personally. I've deployed these things in open source projects in that context as well. It's like, what does it look like to have a healthy open source project, right? AIs are really good at spotting troublemakers in open communities. It also applies to DePINs.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think once you have functional or working real world verification, you can then tie that data to like a reputation graph, right? You can say like, this node has been performing this well for this long, so we trust them more than someone who just joined the network.
Yes.
There's a lot of different approaches to reputation systems in crypto, including like staking and slashing. There's carrots, there's sticks. Like how do you and how do Reppo think about building reputation systems and creating incentive sets where DePINs can go and use them and have things be permissionless on the supply side, but also build a network that's actually usable and valuable?
Yeah, I think that you could deploy AI to try to correctly score people's reputations. You could base your entire reputation on that. I don't know that I would, because AI hallucinates, and so they might, pick somebody who is not a good operator and make them the best one in the network because it had a bad day. AIs are really weird in that way sometimes. But to validate a reputation model, I would trust AI to do that completely. Like, hey, we have this way of scoring. Does this optimize our network? And predicting the like what's going to happen with the network if we deploy this based on past data. I think LLMs would be really good at this. At least giving you sort of a statistical model that you can reason about, like what's the band that it's likely to fall into if we change the metrics in this way. I think the reputation arena is still wide open. I think there is no right answer yet. We know that the 4 stars out of 5 mechanism that we've had in every other context up until now is overly simplistic. And it's also a sledgehammer, and it's also easily gamed, and it's just totally kind of doesn't really apply to the DePIN, I don't think. And I would like to see AIs, that we make available in our market and things like that be used to fine tune reputation systems to, hey, we tried this, that didn't work, or these are the things that happened when we tried this. Hey, we tried that now, and this is what happened. And if you can train the LLM based off of what you would consider sort of an idealized outcome, it can serve as a feedback mechanism in at least in predicting what are the right actions to take, and then also, did it happen the way we thought it did? By looking at, you have to remember these AIs are looking at every event of every peer on the entire network.
All the data, yeah.
Yeah, and it's beyond the capability of a human if the DePIN is any size to be meaningful, right? The scale is just too big. It's looking at, millions, if not billions of events, time series of events that have, million different channels, right? Million different streams of events over time. And it's correlating across streams and trying to predict and detect what's going on. So, or what will happen is trying to predict what will happen and also detect the signals of problems, right?
For sure. I saw you all were doing some interesting work around verifiable restaurant reviews or reviews in general. Mm-hmm. What's wrong in your opinion with the kind of the current state of reviews? You said 4 out of 5 stars, like that system is not great. I have some of my own thoughts here, but curious like how you think reviews can be improved.
Being 4.7, being the only 4.7 restaurant in a sea of 4.5s is very valuable. And what we've seen is their secondary markets that have showed up, or have they're somewhat illicit, but you, as a restaurant, you can literally buy stars. And my opinion on these things is they're just totally gameable. There's no honest reporting, so there's no honest reputations. They're roughly honest, but there are definitely bad actors, and over the years, the cost of an extra star has gone through the roof because these reputation systems have tried to prevent gaming, and the harder it gets, the more expensive it is, right? And so anyway, that's my opinion on what's wrong with them. Curious to see what yours are. I bet we probably are pretty similar. And verifiable reputation stuff is really just about detecting the likelihood that it is gamed, right? And AIs are really good at picking out these signals. Like brand new restaurant, gets 1,000 5.0 reviews in a week. What's the statistical probability of that being true, right? What's harder to detect is the more subtle shifts in it that are, over time or whatever. But AIs are also really good at that, because if you can catch bad actors, you can train models to detect bad actors. And so as these DePINs mature and there are bad actors, that data is very valuable in training an AI and to be able to detect that. So, like I said, it's like an immune system. Your DePIN gets sick, you take the data, you train an LLM, it now is immune because develops some degree of immunity to that, because now it can detect that kind of bad behavior.
Yeah. Well, you heard it here first. Reppo is the DePIN doctor. When your DePIN is sick and you need to create an immune system for it, go to Reppo.
We'll connect you to a market full of the best people who know how to take your pile of data and turn it into models. And then we also provide the rails for you to monetize it. So, you can't prevent competitors in the DePIN space, but maybe you can at least profit on them, profit off of them, your competitors. Like you could create the best model for defending, a particular DePIN type of network from bad behaviors, and then have your competitors license it from you.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we need those things to be incentivized for the DePIN space to move forward.
For sure. I think the other thing that we can offer, that I think these AI models are going to offer, is sort of maturing DePINs to operate more like traditional utilities. Traditionally, utilities are governed by the government, right? There's regulations and fines and all that kind of stuff. But DePINs can't rely on that because they don't operate like a traditional corporation where everybody, is an employee or they own all the infrastructure. And so the only way to be able to govern effectively, I think, at scale will be to use an AI to detect, bad behavior and to, at least in part, automate the rewards in real time.
Definitely.
So that once it starts to sense that you're gaming the system, well, it corrects itself automatically and then, makes a signal or something like that. And so I think that they serve on that side. And then there's another possibility where the AIs can help price risk, so that if you're trying to fund the creation, like through CapEx, capital deployments, and you're trying to fund the creation of a new DePIN or whatever, you can take industry data and can provide some intelligence around what is a fair pricing, right? So that how much of the revenue should be dedicated to paying back any capital investment in the beginning, how big should that capital investment be, what's the terms on that capital investment, all of that stuff can be advised, at least in part, by AIs trained on previous networks, right? So that you can score the risk of like that DePIN might not exist in 4 years, 5 years. Those radios are going to be obsolete in 3 years because the technology keeps changing or whatever. And those are all inputs into CapEx financing, attracting real investment into the development of these DePINs. And it can also help price insurance. I think I'm not an expert in this, but I think it could be used to price insurance against things like regulatory action and stuff like that. What's the likelihood that a DePIN providing telephone service can meet the government regulations of providing emergency services, for instance? And when you don't, there are regulatory actions and that harms the network. Can you insure against that based off of previous performance data of other similar networks or your network even? So I don't claim to be an expert. I usually sit in the room with really smart people and I can remember what they say. And so I'm repeating a lot of that right now.
Of course.
I think AI has a very key role in all of these aspects of DePINs and scaling up to the scales that we want to do, continent-wide services, global services. they're just going to be far too big for humans to watch them. And who watches them? That's the other question, right? If it's a really decentralized physical infrastructure, who becomes the anointed ones that are responsible for watching the network? The idea is that we don't have those, right? Isn't that the ideal goal? Is that there isn't a group of like people who have privileged access who are there to try to protect the network? You know, what we'd love to do is have an AI detecting the signals and warning the governance mechanism, whatever it is for the DePIN, and potentially automatically healing the network by scaling rewards to punish people who are obviously gaming.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, this is definitely the most interesting conversation I've had around how AI can benefit DePIN specifically. There's a lot of like crypto XAI and decentralized compute ideas that I'm going to toss around, but this has been really interesting on AI helping DePINs. That's all I had for you, but thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for the time.
For sure.
Thanks for listening to the Proof of Coverage podcast. We post new episodes Mondays and Wednesdays, interviewing the best DePIN and crypto founders out there. If you like this episode, follow us on Twitter @CoverageProved and all other platforms, including YouTube and Spotify, @Proof of Coverage Podcast. Thank you.